It's now been almost a year. And the idea that you need to arrest a father of 7 with 20 armed FBI agents, it's all a show. It's designed to create this storyline. And again, I think you just have to be smart enough to recognize out there, this is an inflation economy election. This is a border election. This is a crime election. And this is a failure to handle your kids and school election. It ain't an abortion election, and it certainly isn't a referendum on Donald Trump.
It's fascinating what laws the DOJ decides to enforce and what laws it doesn't. I just put that out there, and automatically you'll probably think, well, hold on a second. Immigration law, is it legal to be an illegal in this country? Well, what they do is they nullify the laws by, under the Biden regime, not actually enforcing them. So the laws are still on the books, but people don't actually get deported. So is it really even a law anymore? That's one that's violated millions and millions of times across the country, and the American people are, by solid majority, not on board with this. That's why the Democrats don't like people paying attention to what's going on at our lawless southern border. Another one that Clay and I remember talking about in detail here on the show, you can't actually gather outside the homes of a Supreme Court justice and threaten them. There's a federal law against that. And it's not hard to know if people are breaking that federal law because mobs gathered at the private residence of a Supreme Court justice is clearly meant to obstruct and interfere with the judicial process. But that went on for days and days after the leak. Did we ever find out who leaked that, by the way? I don't think we ever will.
Not.
And if we do, it'll just be that person gets a bigger book deal from the latest, lib publishing company. But the law against intimidation of justices, Clay, was completely unenforced, and they never explained why. All of those people were breaking the law, but it was super important that you could abort a baby for all 9 months of a pregnancy to those people. So Merrick Garland's DOJ did nothing. I mean, they added, after there was an attempt on Kavanaugh's life, a few extra police on the streets to make sure that, they wouldn't have to deal with that one. I bring all this up because over the weekend something happened to show you what the priorities of this Department of Justice really are. A Catholic pro-life activist named Mark Houck was arrested at his Pennsylvania home, rural Pennsylvania, over the weekend. The FBI has confirmed about 20 FBI, or I should say a source at the FBI, about 20 agents showed up early in the morning, banging on the door. They apparently had long guns. They handcuffed Mark Houck. They actually had a belly chain attached to the handcuffs, so he was sort of really, in case he was some risk to them. You might be wondering, what did this pro-life activist do? Oh, he was arrested by the FBI over something called the FACE Act, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. And it has to do with a dispute involving a 72-year-old man identified as BL outside of a Planned Parenthood clinic on October 13th, 2021. Words were exchanged between Houck and this BL, they just give the initials, man, because BL apparently shouted profane things at the son of Houck. There was a shove. There was no serious injury to anyone. This was adjudicated in the courts already. Nothing happened as a result of it. But now Houck had the FBI show up at his home. He faces under the FACE Act, which is a special law that the left passed that if you do anything, if you even stand in the way of somebody trying to get into an abortion clinic, it is a matter of federal law. He faces up to 11 years in prison and fines of up to $350,000. Clay, they had the time to do this, but they don't have the time to investigate Hunter and his dealings. They have the time to do this, but not to track down the months and months of BLM rioters of 2020. Or even, did you see this weekend, the Wawa in Philadelphia? No time for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, look, what's going on here is there is a desperate and calculated attempt to make two things the number one stories in the midterm. Donald Trump, and I will say this, It's amazing to me how quickly that Letitia James lawsuit vanished. Remember, we talked about it. I said, hey, it's a civil lawsuit. It's total BS because, and this is me being a lawyer, who was defrauded here? All of the banks, which if you ever try to get a loan, the idea that they're giving out tens of millions of dollars in loans without doing an amazing amount of due diligence is just not true. But the loans were paid back. So I don't understand how you can commit fraud when the banks that loan the money make back all of their initial investment
It is true victimless crime. There is no victim here.
That's not even a crime because the banks were paid back. I guess you can argue that the banks would have made more money in loans, but are you really arguing that the banks are the victim here, that they didn't do
they didn't bring the complaint. Letitia James is complaining on behalf of the largest and most sophisticated financial institutions on the planet that in their dealings with Donald Trump, she thinks that Trump was too smart for them, basically.
Yes.
That's what she's doing, and it's a joke.
And they made money on them, which is why all of this, as soon as we talked about it, he said it's civil. This is a total BS suit, but it vanished because I think most people are recognizing as we sit here 43 days out from the midterm, Trump's not on the ballot. And by the way, if you do believe Trump is on the ballot and you're a Republican, go out and vote. Trump's not on the ballot himself directly, but if you believe that Democrats are overreaching for Department of Justice purposes, you should go out and vote for all Republican candidates to try to create a check on the raw, unrestrained power of the Biden administration. But they're trying to put Trump on the ballot, and they're trying to put abortion on the ballot. The interesting thing about abortion, we'll come back, I'll break this down a little bit more, but the interesting thing about abortion, Buck, is but for the idiocy of Lindsey Graham, which I'm going to tee off on in this next segment. I mean, the guy's an imbecile right now with what he's trying to do. This is not really on the ballot, Buck, because if you are desperately committed to your state and you care a tremendous amount about what the law is in your state, you can go vote for state legislators, for representatives, for senators in your individual state. But by and large, all Roe v. Wade did, and I think more and more people are recognizing this, is shift the battleground from the courts to the individual state legislatures. Governors can make these choices, and your representatives on a state level. It's not a federal issue anymore. And so they're desperate, Buck, to make it two things, Trump and abortion, and I think they're failing, which is why they're getting more and more aggressive in trying to put this story front and center.
Well, this is showing the left-wing base and the NARAL, Pro-Choice America, Planned Parenthood donor class that Merrick Garland's DOJ, even without any constitutional backing for abortion whatsoever now, overturned, not a constitutional right, deal with it, libs. Merrick Garland's DOJ has their back. At a time when we have, Clay, what is it now, 40% national increase in homicides, 30, 35% maybe?
Yes.
Something like, I think 30,
yes.
35% might be the actual number, but massive increase in national homicides since 2019 at a time when we're finding out that there are police jurisdictions that they could use federal help, by the way. I worked for something that was effectively a fusion center in New York. We had FBI, DEA, NYPD all together, and a lot of times local, state, and federal law enforcement work hand in hand. We have a massive violent crime problem out of control across the country. But Merrick Garland's FBI has the time to go arrest a pro-life activist for a shove without injury 2 years or 18 months ago. You've got to be kidding me. But this is all politics. What Letitia James did with the Trump, whatever we call that civil suit, this is Merrick Garland doing it at the DOJ, which is even scarier.
No doubt. And again, to your point, I believe you said this happened in October of 2021.
Yes.
It's now been almost a year. And the idea that you need to arrest a father of 7 with 20 armed FBI agents, it's all a show. It's designed to create this storyline. And again, I think you just have to be smart enough to recognize out there, this is an inflation economy election. This is a border election. This is a crime election. And this is a failure to handle your kids and school election. It ain't an abortion election, and it certainly isn't a referendum
this
on
law
Donald
is nonsense, by the way. The notion there should be elevated protections for people in essentially a verbal a largely verbal altercation outside of a Planned Parenthood clinic. This is not the federal judiciary. There don't need to be enhanced protections. Sorry, libs, you don't have a constitutional right anymore to this. That's a whole other part of this, too. A lot of these laws need to be rolled back and need to be challenged in the courts. But, I mean, Clay, 11 years for a shove without injury?
I know.
I mean, if the guy hits his head and is in a coma, fine, but he got up and he was fine. The whole thing is crazy.
We know that a first-degree murderer in Memphis, to use as an example, that ended up going on a shooting spree all over the city. What did he get? 3 years for attempted first-degree murder?
Unbelievable.
Remember?
Yes.
I mean, and then he goes out and kills, 4 or 5 people.
This is libs with their law and order. That's how libs do it, friends.